It is Sunday, October 14th, and this is the second day of our 10th annual Jataka Sesshin at the Vermont Zen Center. So today we'll resume looking at a Jataka, or a third Jataka, that deals with both the Bodhisattva in connection with trees and also the consequences and effects of human self-centeredness on the rest of the world. So this is Jataka number 520 out of the 547 in the Pali collection, and it is the Ghana Tindu Jataka. And it could go like this. Long ago in the kingdom of Kampala, a city of the northern Pankalas, a king named Pankala ruled selfishly. His ministers, following their king's lead, were also self-centered. His subjects, oppressed by heavy taxation, meant to line the king's and the ministers' pockets, hid in the forest during daylight hours to avoid the swarm of tax collectors. At night, the villagers and their wives and children returned, but then, because robbers also roamed freely, each night when they returned, they had to drag away the thorn branches they'd piled around the windows and doors of their homes to keep them safe. And then, before sleep, they'd rebuild some of the thorn piles once again for added safety and security. Their labor and anxiety were incessant. By day, they had to escape from the king's men, and at night hide from robbers. All bore deep scratches and wounds from thorns. At that time, the Bodhisattva came to life as the divinity of the Tinduka tree that grew just outside the walls of the king's city. Once a year, the king would go to the tree and make an offering of 1,000 pieces of money. Now a note on this, the Tinduka, a Sanskrit word, is identified with the Diospyros embryoteres, of Malabar ebony, which were were cared for in ancient times. An ancient Indian horticultural recipe for the nourishment of such trees states, the powder of the dung of goats and sheep, the powder of barley, tilla seeds, beef, as well as water should be kept together undisturbed for 7 nights. The application of this water leads to the growth in flowers and fruits of trees, such as Tinduka. In the Tinduka Jataka, which is number 177 in the Pali collection, we learn that the fruit of the tree is sweet, and both people and monkeys enjoy eating its fruit. So, the Tinduka tree, the home of the Bodhisattva divinity, was worshipped by the self-centered king. Then the Bodhisattva divinity of the tree thought, the king honors and worships me. Yet he himself is failing as a ruler. His kingdom is disintegrating into ruin, and he does not even see it. All he sees is his own luxury and wealth. I must protect the realm. No one else can do it. I will admonish him and point out his error. While he respects no one else, he will listen to me. That night the Bodhisattva entered the king's sleeping chamber. Poised in the air, he stood at the head of the king's bed, radiating light like a newly risen sun. The king awoke and, terrified at this divine apparition, stammered, "Who are you radiating such glory?" "Great king, I am the divinity of the Tinduka tree. I come out of compassion for you. Because you rule unwisely, your realm is falling into ruin. In this world, such kings meet with destruction. In the world to come, they are reborn in the hells. When kings are selfish and careless, others also become careless. Self-centeredness spreads like an illness until in time it claims all. A king must be careful. With attention, a wise king lays the foundations for a long, just, and successful rule. He then recited these verses. Eagerness for the way is the path to nirvana. Carelessness and lack of concern lead to death. Vigilant souls are alive. The careless are as if dead while living. From pride comes sloth. From sloth comes loss. From loss comes stuckness, decay, and repetition. Put away sloth, O king. Put away self-centered laziness. Do it now. Tomorrow never comes. Even the brave and ardent can fall. Countless kings have been shorn of their wealth and realm through selfishness. Great lords become like waifs, homeless and forlorn. The wheel of karma turns. Those who are high today may fall low tomorrow. When a king becomes slack, all that was theirs vanishes. That king is filled with shame. You are such a ruler. Having wandered from the true path, a real leader serves the people and the realm. Your realm is given to robbers. No sons will inherit your treasures of gold and grain. Your realm and wealth will be taken. This is not far off and is not hard to see. Friends and family will cast you out. Guards, charioteers, horsemen and footmen will mock you. Stand firm. Regain the true path. Ruling well, true riches increase. Great king, it is not too late. Open eyes and ears. Learn what the people say. Return to a righteous path. This is my advice. No one can offer more. Having spoken, the Bodhisattva then vanished in a great blaze of light. Shaken by this miraculous and divine intervention, the king lay wakeful through the night. In the morning, he donned the clothes of an ordinary man, gave his kingdom into the care of his ministers, and accompanied by his closest advisor, the chaplain, left the city unannounced, intent on uncovering the truth of the Bodhisattva's words. The king and the chaplain walked to a village miles from the capital. A man there was dragging thorn branches from the forest and piling them around his house, closing and securing the house and piling more branches around the locked door. He set off with his wife and children into the forest. When evening came and the king's revenue gatherers had departed, the man and his family returned. While pulling at the piles of thorn brush and dragging them away from the door, a large thorn pierced his foot. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, extracting the thorn, he cursed the king. Inspired by the ever-watchful presence of the tree spirit, Bodhisattva, the divinity of the Tinduka tree, he spoke out his grief in verse. May the king be pierced by an arrow in some fray as I've been pierced by this thorn today. May Pankala mourn for wounding me with the sharp thorn of this thorn tree. The chaplain said, "Are your eyes weak, or are you simply older and dimmer than you look? How can the king be blamed for your pierced foot? You stepped on the thorn, the error is yours. As for the king, what has your carelessness to do with him?" Again, given words by the Bodhisattva, the divinity of the Tinduka tree, the man answered, "It's due to the king that I'm racked with pain. So defenseless folk by oppressors are slain. By night thieves prey on us, tax collectors come by day. Vicious folks run the realm when evil kings bear sway. Distressed by fear to the forest we flee, and round our homes pile thorns for security." The king thought, he has a point. Without the one, then not the other. As they walked farther, the king said, "That man spoke true. It is our fault. Without my careless rule, my people would never have to gather thorns. Without thorns, his foot would not have been pierced. Let us return to the city. I must rule righteously. I have been warned. Disaster heads our way." But the ever-watchful Bodhisattva inspired the chaplain to say, "Great king, it may be so. But let us go on and investigate further to be sure." They came to another village. A poor woman with 2 grown daughters was bringing firewood and leaves from the forest. She did it alone, for she would not allow her daughters to go into the forest without husbands to protect them. Under the weight of her load, she stumbled and fell. In pain, inspired to verse by the tree spirit Bodhisattva, she cursed the king. When will this Brahmadatta die? For unwed daughters' sakes, I cry. For long as he still reigns, they will sigh for husband and children in vain. The king's priest said, foolish and without profit are your words. Is it the king's job to find husbands for unwed maids? Then the woman, given words by the Bodhisattva, said, my words were not spoken in vain. While defenseless folk by oppressors are slain, by night we're prey to thieves, to greedy men by day. Bad people run the show when evil kings hold sway. In such times, how can poor girls hope to wed? Our lot will improve when this king is dead. The king thought, she's not wrong. My people suffer, and as king, what I do lies at the root. Continuing on, they met a plowman whose ox, struck by the plowshare, had been grievously wounded. The plowman cursed not his luck, but the king. So may this punkala fall, speared by some foe, as my ox, now badly hurt, has fallen and lies low. The priest exclaimed, how is the king to blame for your misfortune? You cursed the king, yet the fault is yours. You yourself struck your ox with a plow. It is your own carelessness and not the king's that lies at the root. The plowman, inspired by the watchful Bodhisattva, said, I'm angry with the king, and rightly so, I claim. Defenseless folk are by oppressors slain. By night thieves prey on us, by day it's the king's own men who took my lunch today. To get me food, my wife then had to run. While waiting, I worked on and famished, slipped, and so my ox's leg was ripped. So, thought the king, what I do or fail to do harms people and animals alike. The king and chaplain stopped in a village for the night. In the morning, a man who'd been attempting to milk a wild buffalo cow got kicked and trampled and was badly hurt. The injured man cried aloud, cursing the king. By sword stroke may Punkala fall in a fray, as I am laid low because of him today. The Brahmin said, how is this the king's fault? Why blame him? The injured man, inspired by the Bodhisattva tree divinity, answered, the king is to blame, for in his reign defenseless folk are by oppressors slain. By night it's thieves, by day the king's men harass us sore. My cow they took, while demands for milk grow evermore. A wild buffalo cow I tried to milk today and got badly hurt, so my curse I'll say. Then both the chaplain and king said, he speaks truth. There is a connection. They left the village and turned back to the city. On the way they learned that very day a tax collector had seized and killed a young dappled calf and stripped off its skin simply to make himself an attractive sword sheath. The mother of the calf was so grieved she neither ate nor drank but roamed the village bawling and lamenting. Even the village boys were moved by her single-minded grief. Then they too cursed the king, guided to poetry by the Bodhisattva divinity of the tree. Let Punkala pine away, and let his children weep in vain. Like this poor cow seeking her calf, the king's men have cruelly slain. The chaplain said, an animal was slaughtered. How is this the king's fault? The boys answered, the king's blame is plain. Defenseless beings are by oppressors slain. By night we're prey to thieves, then it's king's men by day. Brutal folk are given license when evil kings hold sway. Why should a calf be slaughtered just to make a pretty sheath? Tell us, pray. The king hung his head. The chaplain sighed and said, there was no call for such brutality. Picking up their pace, they headed for home. They passed a dried-out water tank where crows were stabbing frogs with their beaks and devouring them. The Bodhisattva, by his power of compassion and skillfulness, curse the king from the mouth of a frog. So may Pankala in fight be eaten, his sons and all, as woodland frogs to village crows now fall. The priest exclaimed, kings can't guard every creature, crows eat frogs. It's the way of things. Surely this at least cannot be blamed on the king. But the frog, guided by the compassionate one, said, your words are flattering and will deceive the king. If blessed with prosperity, this realm would peaceful be. Crows as village birds good offerings would then enjoy, and have no need our lives to destroy. The king and his priest both thought, all creatures, down to the little frogs in the water tanks suffer. It must end. The king said, we have reached bottom. In the slime at the root of it is my own mind. Following where selfishness led, I lost the way. The tree god was right. I must change my life. From now on, I will bring benefit and not harm to my subjects, even down to the frogs. When he returned to his city and resumed his throne, that is what he did. In time, the realm again prospered. At the conclusion to this Jataka, the Buddha said, a leader must forsake evil courses and rule for the benefit of all. If he does, he will prosper, and all will benefit. At that time, the divinity of the Tinduka tree was myself. While he did not identify the king or minister, we must suppose, given their response to his teaching, that they would in time become close to him. Perhaps Ananda had been the deluded king, and the chaplain, Sariputra. So now let's take a look at this from the perspective of practice. The Jataka of the Tinduka tree presents a story familiar to us in the world's legends and literature, as well as all too familiar in its history and politics. Self-centered leaders create problems all the way down. James Baldwin said, you think your pain and heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world. And then you read, the state rots from the top down. The responsibilities of leadership are at least as great as, if not greater than, the perks. Anyone who's held a position of responsibility at home or on the job knows this. Parents know, and it is an uncomfortable knowledge that children model themselves not on what parents advise, but on what parents do. In another Jataka, as the Prince Temia, the Bodhisattva went to extraordinary lengths to avoid receiving kingship. He had reached the point where he saw how easy it would be, given that unrestrained power, to go astray. Words, perhaps, to the wise. So there is nothing surprising in this story, except for the supernatural intervention of a tree divinity who is no other than the Bodhisattva in a past life. Here's where we're asked by a 2,500-year-old tale to step beyond a conventionally limited view and open to a wider and perhaps truer one. It is not simply a matter of having faith. Trees are alive, and forests we know, or are coming closer to knowing, manifest a vast web of communication which may be profoundly compassionate, at the least as far as other trees are concerned. Then again, trees shelter so many lives, both when alive as well as when rotting and dead, selflessly hosting birds, beetles, ants, larvae, mosses, fungi, as well as they decay into pulp, adding life-supporting nutrients to the soil, not to mention their commitment to pumping oxygen into the air, thereby making life possible for air-breathing beings. Without trees, there would be no animal life on Earth. It's that simple. Who's to say that no compassionate, or at least humbly selfless, aspiration lies beneath this? If not in thoughts alone, but in deeds lies truth, then trees, like whales and dolphins, give off the markings of compassion. We owe to trees the gift of life. Bodhisattvas and trees then would naturally seem to go together. Perhaps trees are essentially, as we spoke about yesterday, bodhisattvic. Personally, I mentioned this also yesterday, as someone growing up in a middle-class post-World War II housing development off the Long Island Expressway in Queens, New York City, trees were some of my earliest companions. I'd climb way up into them and stay all day, feeling the bark beneath my fingers, listening to the talk of the leaves, feeling bole and branches moving alive and supple in the breeze. I felt a sense of kinship and friendship. Perhaps you have similar memories. We saw two aspects of this one story in yesterday's Jatakas. In one tale, the Bodhisattva is a compassionate tree spirit, God or divinity. In the other, we saw how righteous rule benefits all the land, even to the sweetness of its fruits, and how unrighteous rule poisons the realm. In today's Jataka, and in one of the earlier tales, the Bodhisattva uses his power as a tree divinity to care for others. The spirit of a tree may in reality be this expansive, seeking to provide nourishment and shelter to all. This seems to be the Bodhisattva's nature as a tree spirit. Yet, even with such an aspiration, how can a tree or tree spirit act to help others? What can a tree do? Trees are mobile to a limited extent and on an extremely slow time scale. Root tips seek out water, leaves instinctively turn toward light, chemical messages spread along the linked networks of a forest, but slowly compared to the quickness of animals. The old expression, the quick and the dead, expresses this. Animal life is quick, their nerves instantly responsive. To cut beyond the dead nail is to cut into the quick. How can a tree intercede to do good? Beyond giving fruit, shade, oxygen, and offering a home to bugs, rodents, fungi, and birds. In this tale, the Bodhisattva as a tree divinity demonstrates a wide-ranging awareness, the kind of awareness we are learning today that a tree might actually have, woven as it is through root and leaves and mycelium webs into the fabric of forest and city, as well as into the earth itself, and into the essential light of sun, moon, and stars. And he uses this vast awareness to create a context through which wisdom and compassion can arise. His actions, while not overt, are skillful, quietly inspiring life-changing wisdom. But first, he steps forward directly to clearly make his point. Don't do this, he admonishes the king. Don't do harm. Stop before you destroy yourself and your realm. Pulling no punches, he aims to stop the evil that is arising. Then in smaller, quieter ways, he intercedes almost from behind the scenes, nudging the king toward a confirming insight, working to bring to life the good that does not yet exist. In short, he works to stop evil, do good, and save the many beings, fulfilling the three general resolutions of Buddhist tradition. Do good, avoid evil, save the many beings. The king never knows that such committed bodhisattvic activity lies behind his seemingly chance encounters. All he knows is that the tree divinity charged him to respond to the truth of his own life. Going out to verify what he's been told, we see the king's potential. He will not simply accept divinity's words, but must confirm their truth or falsity for himself. In this, he establishes a foundation for genuine and lasting change. Rather than simply doing what he's told or reacting in fear to a supernatural warning, he finds personal truth to be the best motivation. The king's positive response to the bodhisattva's guidance suggests that they will likely meet again in future lives and in beneficial ways. In this Jataka, the Bodhisattva offers us a model for skillful action. he makes it clear that we need not draw attention to ourselves to do what is good and right. In working to fulfill those three general resolutions to do good, avoid evil, and liberate the many beings, we too can find ways to act quietly, effectively, and unobtrusively. A kind word, a quiet thanks, an outstretched hand can create new possibilities, as can washing the extra dish, going the extra mile, and extending a moment of loving kindness. Being invisible is not the point. This too can become its own kind of fetish, like trying in awkward and overly complex ways to avoid using the pronoun I. Doing what can be done and doing it in ways that are helpful are the point. If something beneficial can be done and done without unnecessarily adding to our own burden of self-centeredness, why, all the better. Trees and plants may form a quietly contemplative web of goodness around the planet. Silently flourishing, harmlessly drawing energy from sun, soil, water, I can see them as not simply passive, but rather as actively beneficent. They may indeed, as the Jataka show, be quite actively wishing us well, moment by moment, dropping attachment to habitual self-centeredness. In breath-by-breath Zen practice, we too can align ourselves with the fundamental goodness with a capital G that sustains all beings, and like trees and grasses, work for the benefit of all, even as we work for the enlightenment of grasses and trees. To do this, we needn't always make a point of confronting others. Directness has its place. The Bodhisattva in our tree tale starts there. Stepping forward, radiating brilliant light, he clearly and definitively says, "Stop!" Then after that, he works more subtly, influencing the action in hidden ways. Blake wrote, "God appears and God is light to those poor souls who dwell in night, but does a human form display to those who dwell in realms of day." The formidable Matsu Baso in Japanese, perhaps the most significant teacher in the formative early Tang period of Zen in China, with something like 80 enlightened disciples, could be quite direct. He once asked his student Baichang, that's Yakujo in Japanese, when they were out for a stroll, "What was that flying off?" Baichang said, "A wild duck." Matsu asked, "Where has it gone?" Baichang said, "It flew away." Whereupon Matsu twisted Baichang's nose hard and exclaimed, "When did it ever fly away?" thereby bringing the great Baichang to realization. But Matsu also had the practice of quietly making straw sandals and leaving them where monks whose sandals were wearing thin could find them and exchange their worn-out old ones for new. We too can learn to work in small, steady ways, helping where we are to establish a ground or context for greater insight, kindness, and compassion. Making small, skillful changes, we can help where help is needed and foster the possibilities for awareness that precede a real change of heart. Our countless Zen ancestors, men and women, lay and ordained, offer us many transformative possibilities in the form of daily zazen, mundo, koans, zendos, chanting services, vows, and sesshin. These are tremendous gifts arising out of the sustained exertion of all who have walked this path before. Gradually, we too may learn not to make a big deal about moments of selfless, spontaneous action for the greater good. Such moments become more of our ordinary mind. Yet selfless moments of functioning life skill are typically hard-won. They can take not just years of daily ongoing practice to come to fruition, but lifetimes. For ripening bodhisattvas, practice, realization, and skillful activity are art forms to be worked on and endlessly developed in the circumstances of actual life. If it is our intention to benefit others, even though we will fail many times, little by little, like grains of sand gathering into a pile, skills improve. Tiny, almost unseen actions can add up to tipping points that have ripple effects. Over time, such events become more natural and unself-conscious, spontaneous and unforced. But this doesn't simply happen on its own. We work at it and we practice it. Dogen wrote, to practice the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self simultaneously means forgetting the self we label others. Selfless practice continues endlessly. For the king and for his Brahmin advisor, chaplain in this Jataka, the brutal slaughter of the little calf to make a tax collector's fancy sword sheath provides a tipping moment. After the litany of pains arising from the king's self-indulgence and negligence, the horror of this added piece confirms a new path. It opens the door to a new life for the realm and all its beings. The conversation with the frog, magical and beyond the rational, nails it. The whole realm groans for liberation from the consequences of one man's self-centered inclinations, one man's wandering from the true path. Sin was originally an archery term, and it meant to miss the target. If rot starts at the top, so does healing. The king returns to his throne a new man, one with the power to transform the kingdom. All this occurs because a tree spirit, the Buddha, in a past life, through skillful and selfless generosity, found a way to embody the selfless aspiration to shelter an entire realm. But it's actually a bit more mutual. The healing of the kingdom can only occur because the king, unrighteous as he is, has left one little door open. He holds the Tinduka tree to be sacred, and so has left one small area free of his own immense self-centeredness. Through this opening beyond egotism, innate goodness finds a way to flow. A great Zen teacher once said, "I want to become like a great shade tree, capable of sheltering all beings. Unskilled and flawed as we are, we can each work to make this same broad-minded aspiration real." How? By making all we do an aspect of practice, practicing daily and holding that practice at the core of each moment. We can give up our habitual conditioned focus on self-centeredness and allow original mind to come forth and come alive. It is always a choice. Practice is never a habit. The time to practice and the commitment to practice can, of course, become habits and good ones, allies in the transformation of a random and wandering life into one that is focused and vow-based. But practice itself has no before and no after. Given this, it cannot be habitual. It is just this count, just this breath, just this koan point. And because it is a choice, a conscious choice made again and again, over and over, one of the many such choices of the use of body and mind potential to us as human beings, every generation must face the ongoing, recurring, fundamental problem of self-centeredness, the root of evil. What we term evil is unrestrained egotism, the result of ingrained self-centered behaviors coupled with a willingness to benefit the self at the expense of others. This is a problem unique to the human realm as far as we know. Animals may kill and eat other animals, but they do not murder terrorize, or invade. The non-human beings of Buddhist cosmology, devas, yakshas, nagas, kinnaras, asuras, garudas, hungry ghosts, and hell dwellers, each have their realms. In some, terrible things are done, but it is not by foregoing other options, not by choice. A demon does demonic things. An asura, a warring titan, is always looking for a brawl. But in the human realm, other choices must be ignored in order to bring selfish and harmful ones to life. Why does this happen? Childhood issues, psychology, genetics, social sciences only go so far in explaining the uprising of human evil. Why do some cling to ego, to greed, anger, and ignorance as their only reality, and from that limited base become willing, even eager, to do terrible things? Are there evil people, or just terribly deluded and misguided ones? And when we see such behaviors, what can be done? How can they be stopped or contained? How do we live our vows in difficult times? This is a perennial question without easy answers. Of course, one response, and a good one, a fundamental one, is practice itself. Don't overlook this and think you're doing nothing by practicing awakening Zazen. In the Bendoa, in Negotiation of the Way, Dogen wrote, "The Zazen of even one person at one moment imperceptibly accords with all things and fully resonates through all time. Thus, in the past, future, and present of the limitless universe, this Zazen carries on the Buddha's transformation endlessly and timelessly. Each moment of Zazen is equally the wholeness of practice, equally the wholeness of realization. This is so, not only while sitting, like a hammer striking emptiness before and after its exquisite sound permeates everywhere. How can it be limited to this time and space? Myriad beings all manifest original practice, original face. It is impossible to measure. Even if all Buddhas of the 10 directions, as innumerable as the sands of the Ganges, exert their strength and with the Buddha wisdom try to measure the merit of one person's Zazen, they will not be able to fully comprehend it. The effects of one person choosing to act on a selfless impulse of generosity has unlimited effects. To begin to live this way, allowing Zazen to inform our life and not just stay on the mat, is key. For it is equally true that the actions of one person committed to self-centeredness, to me, mine, and my precious self above all else, will rend the social fabric and bring hardship to all. If deep down you think we are not connected, that you stand alone, an isolated, hard-edged ego, and harbor doubt about the vast interbeing that is Indra's net, a model of our own true nature, look again. Our ordinary life, our own times proclaim the truth of endless interconnection, now positively, now from a negative perspective. But in each case, whether positive or negative, the fundamental point is clear. Whatever happens around us affects us. And conversely, what we each do, how we each think, experience, and live simultaneously affects all. We uphold the Dharma as we are. We co-create the world as we are. The Three Musketeers had it more right than they knew. When they said, one for all for one, they might have been thinking iron, but got gold. A Zen master once said, each branch of coral upholds the moon. Realization. That is, the realization of non-duality is the source of true goodness. But having made an effort and gotten a degree of peace, we cannot remain sitting quietly there. The Buddha did not stay seated under the Bodhi tree in perfect harmony and peace. He got up from the joy and comfort of deepest realization, from Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, complete and perfect enlightenment, to walk the dusty roads of India, teaching all he encountered. Like the Buddha, like the Bodhisattva, we too must find ways to engage with our world and times and help give the Dharma wheel a turn. Having glimpsed the truth that all is none other than the self, our empathy can extend limitlessly. Basho wrote, "Deep autumn, my neighbor. How does he live, I wonder?" As today's Jataka reveals, the natural world is conscious and is aware of and suffers from effects arising within our human world. From highest to lowest, all are affected by how we humans think and act. What we do affects not only ourselves, but all. It is an awesome responsibility to be a conscious human being. Touching one strand of Indra's jeweled net moves all the strands. Perhaps the natural world is also trying to signal us. The signs of interconnection are getting painfully clear. Glaciers melt, rainforests recede, deserts grow, ocean levels rise, line ticks move north. Might all this be an aspect of the long, broad tongue that the Chinese Zen poet Su Tung Po wrote of in his famous Enlightenment verse? The sound of the valley stream is his long, broad tongue. The form of the mountains, his pure body. During the night, I heard 1,000 verses chanted. Now, how can I impart them to others? Dogen wrote, "What we mean by sutras is the entire cosmos. The sutras are the entire universe, mountains and rivers and the great earth, plants and trees." That's in Jisho Samai, the Samadhi of Self-Enlightenment section of Shobogenzo, Eye of the Treasury of the True Dharma. How shall we read such sutras? Sesshin, sustained by daily, ongoing practice, is an excellent way to find out. To conclude, once a monk asked Zhao Chu, Joshu, "What is the meaning of Bodhidharmas coming from the West?" Joshu answered, "The oak tree in the front garden." So we'll stop here and see what we'd like to explore in relation to this Jataka.